Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about the astrology and the shootings that took place at the Santa Clarita, California school. And Nathaniel Burhow was the I don't know if I'm saying his name right. Nathaniel Burhow, I believe, was the shooter. Apparently, at least the alleged shooter. Of this crime. And the first thing I want to talk about is that my heart goes out to the families, the victims of these people, this heinous crime, this very brutal, ruthless murder. I mean, this is something too, my prayers, condolences do go out to them, and they also, in prayers for the people that are hospitalized right now as a result of this heinous crime. And it's just really terrible. This is a very impromptu video. People are going to be very concise. It's not going to be overly analytical because I didn't really have much time to look at the charts extensively, as far as the charts of the shooter and the actual shooting event chart. But what I do know is that, the thing about this is this person did this apparently on his birthday, the shooter. And you're talking about wanting to shine in something Scorpio-like, in terms of murder and death. This is sadly what happened. You have transit Mercury in retrograde, obviously not helping right now. The person apparently has been declared brain dead as well, the shooter. Interestingly enough, you have transit Chiron in Aries retrograde. And of course, when you have you retrograde Chiron, this could be about a lot of self-inflicted wounds. You're talking about Aries, of course, the head and the face. I believe he did shoot himself in the head. And he has been, as best of my knowledge, declared brain dead at this time. I don't know if he's been officially confirmed dead or not, but that is something that you may be able to, look up later on if you want, if you choose to do that. The thing about this is he also, I didn't have his time of birth, of course, but I had his birth date is November 14, 2003, 16 years old. Shot, obviously, he did these shootings. There's at least 2 people dead and 3 in the hospital, to the best of my knowledge right now, and because of this. And Scorpio, in a negative manifestation, is the sign most inclined, in the greatest proclivity toward murderous tendencies and nefarious actions. Who really knows what was going on with this person? Again, I didn't really have much time to look at his chart extensively. He has Mercury in Sagittarius, and if I remember right, of course, I don't remember this. I know this part. Mercury in Sagittarius is in its detriment. He also, if I do remember right, had Mercury square Uranus, which of course can give some kind of erratic thinking in some cases, in some isolated moment, in isolated cases. And Mercury, if it's afflicted in a chart, of course, it can indicate, some kind of, in some cases, some mental instability, depending on, the whole condition of Mercury in one's horoscope. But again, I didn't really have time to look at it very fully or very extensively. I know the shooter also had, at this time, he had transit, the transit Jupiter was near his natal Pluto, not far from it. And when I've talked about Jupiter previously in astrology, that my videos, that it can be somewhat paradoxical. It could be very strongly benign and benevolent, but it could also have a tendency to enlarge and expand. Now, in some cases, this can enlarge, and expand murderous tendencies in a negative manifestation when you have the transit Jupiter near one's Pluto. Now, I know it doesn't do this for everybody in every instance, but in some cases, I believe this can actually happen. And I think maybe it played a little bit of a role in this person astrologically and what he decided to do. You also right now have, intellectually, you have transit Saturn conjunct Pluto. When you have the transit like that, a lot of it can be about very premeditative type of murders. And really, maybe that's why we're seeing it might be more of a prevalence, and this may be going on, sadly, right now. But the thing about this too is it's also, it's just a situation, looking at this, that it's really just it's a very sad, tragic situation that happened. When I looked at the event chart of this of the shooting at this California school. It was based on 7:30 a.m. time for November 14th, 2019, at that location, at the school's location. And it had, based on that chart, I had it at 4 degrees Sagittarius rising, and of course 4 degrees can be really, that's a critical degree. 4 degrees in mutable signs, of course, is critical. Sagittarius, when you look at an event chart, I see the ascendant, of course, like the face of the event. So when you have Sagittarius on the ascendant, this could indicate, really a very foolhardy, self-righteous energy. It's a negative manifestation, over optimism, and doing things with a lot of recklessness and a lot of, this negative, and maybe I'd say in this case, a very negative, fearless energy, basically. And it's something to where this you look at it, you look at something like this as well. And the thing about this is that in the event chart, what I want to say as well is that there's a mutable T-square configuration in that chart, and it involved the Venus in Sagittarius opposing the Moon in Gemini, and both those points were squared by Neptune in Pisces in the third house. And when you look at the Neptune and Pisces in the third house is, of course, the focal point of that T-square configuration. The focal point of a T-square configuration can be seen as that point of over-accentuation, over-emphasis, over-compensation. And the Neptune in the third house, of course, could be about chaos and distortion, confusion in a school-related matter, because the third house, of course, can rule early education. And I say it as like school children as well, and in schools that are connected with one's early education. So there you go, sadly. And the thing about this too is when you look at this as well, I believe Pluto was in the second house in that event chart. And of course, Pluto in the second house can be about really destroying, obliterating self, really at this time, that the self-worth to some degree. And maybe this person that did this had really very, his self-esteem and self-worth might have felt like it was obliterated and annihilated at this point in time. And looking at this as well, you talk about a person, doing, committing this heinous crime the way he did. And when I looked at his chart, based on, the solar sunrise chart I had to do, of course, because of course I didn't have his actual, time of birth, and I used the location of the shooting as the birth time. So of course everything, what I'm saying, is very approximated. But the one thing he did have, I believe, regardless of time of birth and location, based on what I had seen, he had Saturn was like, and it was at the apex point in a yod configuration. Saturn in his 8th house of death was in that point in his in that solar sunrise chart I did for him. And when you have Saturn, Saturn in the 8th house, when you're talking about a yod configuration, the apex or focal point is seen as that point of action, being directed, what you can, as far as taking action, what you can do. Maybe it worked out it came across in a negative manifestation. Maybe that's like this responsibility toward death at this time. And I thought it was interesting, sadly, is that he had at this time, this shooter, at the time of this murder that he committed, assuming this was the person that did. This is the alleged shooter that I'm talking about, of course, but he transit north node was right by his Saturn at this time. He has Saturn in Cancer. Of course, Saturn in Cancer, of course, it's in its detriment. And I understand it's generational, but I just wonder if maybe he had some issues with his, difficulties with his home and his family life to some degree, and his own emotional security. And maybe this is something to do, built up some anger in him perhaps. And again, Saturn is in that eighth house in that solar sunrise chart, which can be connected with death and murder. So this is something I thought was pretty interesting. And when you're talking again about that apex point in that chart, the point of action, sadly, could it have indicated he felt he had that responsibility toward murder? I mean, it's in a very, it's very, I mean, really, it's a warped thing, but that maybe that's what he felt at the time. And when you have the transit north node close to a point in close proximity to some points in chart, a lot of times that can be something that we may have to confront, or maybe it was just a simple point where he had to he was going to take responsibility for some death at this point in time, is how that worked out as far as the north node, the transit north node being very close to his Saturn at this point in time. So I think those are some ways that this might have panned out at this time, sadly, with this person. And again, this is a situation that was terrible, that really didn't, I mean, there's really, it seems like there should be something that can be done to try to, I don't know what word I'm looking for is preclude, or try to inhibit or restrict these kind of moments from transpiring. And it just, you have this energy, or just something about this energy right now, and that it's almost like these shootings are becoming a norm, for a lot of these people, sadly. And it's just terrible that this has to be transpiring, but unfortunately we're still having to deal with this. And the thing is, there's virtually no place that is really completely safe. It's like you can't really go anywhere anymore with that full certainty that you're going to get out unscathed and unharmed, whether it's a movie theater, whether it's a park, whether you know how safe you might feel. And it might feel like this sanctuary, feel like a safe haven, but you just say it's just this really strong fear now, in this state of trepidation that people are sadly being put in because of situations like this. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment um, for my take, if you will, on astrology and this shooting in California. And again, my heart goes out to the families of these victims, and I pray that these the people that are hospitalized right now will get out of this. That may be in a perilous situation, perhaps will get out of this alive. And that's pretty much. But until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying, stay well.